Good evening all, and welcome. Are you interested, good at, or amazing at digital art? If you think you are, I have a super secret project which I'm working on that requires help from a digital artist. There will of course be an exchange of money for the service of artist, so if this is something that interests you, feel free to let me know. Email in the description, themortismedia@gmail.com. But without further ado, it's time to get comfortable. Get your flashlights ready and let the darkness take control. My parents explore abandoned towns and mines as a hobby. When I was younger, I would get dragged along with them, but when I started college, I stopped going with them. However, in those times that I did go with them, I did encounter a lot of things that made me feel uneasy. Of course, I am and always have been a skeptic, so I always just assumed that it was the atmosphere getting to me. But there was one time that I legitimately can't explain what I saw. For context, I live in Arizona, and most of the places we explored were in the northern part of the country. There's quite a few towns in that area that are dying or have already died, and there are plenty of mines that have long since been out of operation. I can't remember where this encounter took place, but I do know my parents wanted to visit it after they saw some paranormal investigation show cover the site of this abandoned mine. My parents aren't exactly paranormal investigators, but they do like visiting and photographing creepy locations, and supposedly haunted locations usually end up having some truly haunting imagery. Getting to this mine was more trouble than any of us expected. The road was so rough that we had to park off to the side and walk a mile or two to even get there. I don't remember if she heard this from anyone in the local town or if it was mentioned in the TV show, but apparently a few years prior, a couple of kids went exploring at the mine and went missing. It was an assumption that the kids probably fell down an open shaft, as they weren't blocked off, and once I got a good look at them myself, they truly looked like bottomless pits. More so than any other creepy place we have visited, I just felt so uncomfortable here. I'm not a particularly violent person, but a voice in the back of my mind kept telling me to push my stepmom down into the mine shaft. After all, she was standing right in front of them with her back turned to me while she was trying to take pictures down it. No matter how much I tried to shake off the idea, I couldn't help but feel like it was in my best interest to just push her down. Once she stepped away from the bottomless pit, the thought went away and I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I've heard that these kind of morbid thoughts aren't too uncommon, especially around ledges, but part of me feels like this was different, even though I can't say I have any proof that it was. I just had this feeling, this overwhelming hatred come over me in those moments that she stood standing in front of it, and a few seconds felt like hours. After she was done taking pictures around that area, she went to go photograph some other areas while my father and I started walking down a path to see if there was anything of interest on the other side. While we were coming around a bend in the path, we saw someone else. It was a man who looked to be in his mid-20s. He was decked out in full mining gear, and although I'm no expert on mining attire, it definitely looked old-fashioned. He gave us a wave and walked off the path towards an empty clearing, where I assume there probably were more open shafts, although I wouldn't know, because my father immediately turned to me and told us we had to leave. I've tried coming up with explanations for who this man was, but there are lots of things that didn't add up. The mine there wasn't operational, so obviously there wouldn't be anyone in full mining gear walking around. I considered for a long time that it could have just been a practical joke of some kind, on anyone who went there after seeing the Paranormal TV show. However, we saw no vehicles on the way up the rugged road, and we didn't visit this place right after it featured on said TV show. It must have been at least 6 months after, not to mention it's not easy to find. We literally had to hunt down locals and ask them for directions, because Google wasn't helpful in telling us where to go, as the road leading to the mine was unmarked. It's been 7 years, and I still get chills whenever I think about it. I am an avid urban explorer, and in December a friend and I drove to a location about 45 minutes away from home. It was in a small town in Pennsylvania. To get to the abandoned house, and more or less crumbling house, we had to drive on a 1-lane road through a forest. When we entered that road, there was a dead deer lying on the side of the road. Not uncommon, but it would be later on. Then her GPS malfunctioned and told us to return to the route, even though we were already on it. The arrow was pointing in the opposite direction we were going, away from the forest. We kept driving anyway and turned into the parking lot. There were only a few cars. There's a walking trail in the forest that people use to bike and run. We go to the structure, an old water tower, and take some pictures, and opt to walk on the trail. We're both feeling really off, like there was a secret that everyone on the path knew except for us. We were the only ones on the path, and we were walking and making small talk, when we heard a bike bell behind us. We turn around, and a woman goes ahead of us on her bike, and then stops to tie her shoe. We keep walking, and my friend says, "Look at her bike, there's no bell on it." So we have no idea where the bell came from. There were only about 4 cars in the parking lot, but we ended up passing over 30 people. They all stared at us too, never breaking eye contact. Then my friend pointed out something, a boulder that had a stream of water trickling down it, but there wasn't a source or a crack. It was just starting from the middle of the rock. Again, it was weird. We kept walking down the trail, and I stopped and pointed into the forest. There was a tall black figure standing far by the trees. It looked like a man, but I couldn't make out any clothes or even a face. We were looking at it, when there was a loud snapping noise right behind us, like a tree branch. We turned around quickly, but there weren't any sticks or branches on the ground at all. When we looked back in the direction of the figure, it was gone, all in about 5 seconds. The entire time we felt drowsy and off, so we decided that we were going to walk back to the car and leave. There was no one else there, and no cars in the parking lot. We drove back through the forest road. We were only out there for about an hour, and when we got to the intersection that brought us out to the forest, the deer was still on the side of the road, except it was entirely bones. Just a skeleton, not even bloody. It was completely clean. All that was left was the head, which was still on the skeleton. Nothing could have eaten or skinned it that fast, especially not without leaving any fur or blood. At this point we were freaked out enough and just wanted to go home. And then her trunk opened. There's a certain button on the car that you have to press, and her hands weren't even near it. She got out the car to close it, and all of the doors in the car clicked and locked on their own, except my passenger door that stayed unlocked. We had service too, but her GPS wouldn't start to work again until we were out of that town. I don't really know what happened, but it felt like something in that place wanted us gone. And every time we pointed out something that was strange, something else would distract us from looking too closely at it. I'd love some closure to this. It still makes me feel uneasy. Sometimes I dream about it, and the same word always comes into the dream. Harvest. I don't know why. A couple of minutes ago, I looked up the coordinates to the place because I had them on my phone but couldn't remember the address. The people wanted to know where this place was, and the first thing to pop up was abandoned paper mills to be demolished on Friday. There was no talk of demolishing the place a month ago. About 10 years ago, I would have been in my early 20s. Me and two of my friends decided one night to head down some train tracks and break into an old abandoned coal mine on the outskirts of town. My friend had been there a week before exploring with a buddy, and so we climbed through a hole in the fence they had cut. This place was pitch black, and I had no experience with mining yards, so I could only imagine what these giant looming towers and silos were all around us. I could just barely make out these darker patches that were giant doors and holes in the structure, and hear scuttling noises beyond. These noises could easily be explained as pigeons or bats, so we were not too fazed. We continued to our destination. We knew that our town was surrounded by old World War II forts and bunkers, and there was one on a hill in the middle of the mine yard. As we slowly crept towards our goal, I kept hearing a small tapping noise. Not too alarming, just a small tick, 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 coming from the dark behind us in the direction we had come. We make it to the base of the hill that holds the bunker, and find some way to snake around the only pole light in the yard and up the hill. The whole time, we hear the soft tink, tink, tink behind us. Having made it up the hill, and faced with the option to head into the bunker, us brave men decide to pass. Little too creepy for us with no lights to find our way in or out. Instead, we decide to head around back, and this is where things get interesting. We find ourselves standing around a hole with a ladder leading down into a lower level on the bunkers, with that relentless tink, tink, tink coming from somewhere out in the shadows. Now, on two sides of us are the steep drop-offs of the hill. On the other sides are the walls of the bunker. We were boxed in on all sides, with only a small path leading out, and with the hole and ladder in the ground at our feet. So we decide this is a good place as any to light a joint, and so I break it out. With my back to the drop of the hill a few feet behind me, and the hole directly at my feet, I try. I'm on the top of a hill without much cover from the wind, and have a difficult time getting the joint lit, and I'm growing frustrated. Not to mention that the tink 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 is starting to get annoying. Up until this point, I assumed it was a metal sign hanging on the fence we climbed through, gently blowing in the wind, and so ignored it. Frustrated with the joint and getting annoyed with the sound, I turned around and stared in its direction. I asked my friends what they thought it was, and tried again to light the joint. But this time I was facing the noise. I did not try to conceal the flame. As soon as the lighter flashed, the noise changed from a soft tink, tink, tink into a thunderous boom. "Oh shit, security guards," was the first thing to pop into my head. That booming noise is them running down metal stairs in one of the dark towers. They saw my face when the lighter's fire illuminated me, and they must be on their way. All three of us crouch halfway between flight and fight, unsure if we should run, hide, or do nothing. We all decide to wait. It's too dark for them to find us easily, and they're so loud that we'll hear them the minute they get close. Boom! The noise just won't stop, and I swear it's getting louder. How long are those stairs, I think? This is weird. And I swear I hear movement in the grass in the darkness at the bottom of the hill. We all agree it was probably just the wind in the grass, but decide it was time to sneak our way out of this place. Slowly crouching through the dark, we move through the mining yard towards our exit, when we run into a problem. Whatever is making the noise in between us and the exit. We squat down the middle of an open gravel road to try figuring out our next move. Safe in the thought, it was just too dark for anyone to see us sitting there in the dirt. But just to be sure, we picked a spot that placed a large chain link fence between us and that god-awful boom boom boom. Now at this point I decided to upgrade the guards to cops in my mind, and I was becoming a bit antsy, but we decided to wait them out. I guess at this point we all realized that none of this is making any sense. The guards or cops should have reached the bottom of the stairs by now, and that's when it got even weirder. With the boom in front of us and nothing to do but wait if we wanted to use our only known exit, we start to hear something else. In the dark all around us, but somewhere close and on the same gravel we're crouching on, things start to move. There was a thud noise and then a slow scraping noise as something was dragged across the gravel. Then again from elsewhere, quiet but very close. These noises were all around us, thuds, then a slow dragging across gravel, but we could not really pinpoint in which direction they were coming from. At this point, I go from rational adult to scared kid, and think of all the people who died at this mine, or what could be living in those tunnels. In my mind, the noise went from guards to police, shot past ghost, and is now smack dab in the middle of goblin and giant rat. Of course, we have to get the hell out of there, and decide that climbing the fence behind the mine, running into the woods, and making our way into the highway is our only option. And so we pick our butts up out of the dirt and sneak as fast as we can the hell out of there. We're making it. The noises are now behind us and not getting any closer, and we find rows and rows of empty coal train cars. Perfect. We can walk freely between them with no chance of being spotted from a distance. With the end of the mine yard close by, and with the protection of the train cars, we relax a bit and talk in a less hushed whisper. I guess that was a mistake. A few seconds after entering the rows of train cars, the first car explodes in a boom noise. Whatever was making that booming noise was right behind us, only feet away. I have never in my life, nor I ever, I'm sure, moved so swiftly again. The hundreds of feet between me and the fence to the outside world flew by, and I still do not understand how I got over the 10-foot fence so easily. I just remember leaping off it into the dark. We made it into the road and ahead back to town. The roads bend around the mine, and we could still hear the relentless boom of something smashing that train. My friends got too uncomfortable talking about it and seemed content to forget anything weird ever happened. But my curiosity drives me nuts, and I've gone back there a few times over the years. Nothing out of the ordinary has happened, and the last time I went by myself, everything was torn down and taken away. This happened a few years ago, and I figured I'd share it as I find myself wondering what happened almost every day. My friend and I were interested in investigating a nearby abandoned factory that had a fire happen in it many years ago. So we geared up, grabbing everything we could to make sure we would be okay going into this place. There was a shattered glass window at the back of the factory, where we were going to enter the building from. The first time we pulled into the parking lot, she told me that she didn't like the feeling she was getting, so I pulled away from the building. We turned down a road, seeing a shadow with no features walking down the side of the building. His gait suggested he was injured. So, I turned around, and he was closer this time. We turned around to leave again, with our eyes on him the entire time, and he was gone. We chose to leave at that very moment and try and find a new location, and my friend started to become very silent and unresponsive to me talking to her. As we passed a few places, she started speaking in a monotone voice, staring straight ahead the whole time. She was telling me that someone hung themselves at this place. Someone burnt to death here. Someone shot someone here. Meanwhile, I tried to converse with her to no avail. We left the city we were in and pulled into a Walmart. As we were sitting there, she suddenly came to, asking where we were and what time it was and why we were there. She had no recollection of anything she had said or of any location we had visited. I then showed her a half-hour recording of her that I took on my old cell phone, and she was shocked and had to leave immediately. I went home and researched all the deaths she was talking about, and they were all accurate. Back when I was in high school, my friends and I loved exploring creepy places. A few of us had our driver's license, so on weekend nights we would gather a group of 6 to 10 people and go on an adventure. One summer, our favorite place to go was this abandoned movie theater on the west end of town. This place had probably closed down about 3 years before we started visiting it, and in that time it had become a run-down building. There were no trespassing signs on the front entrance, and each of the fire exits around the building coming from the theater rooms. The glass at the main entrance was all broken and had been boarded up. The front door was busted and didn't latch or lock, so people were able to get inside. We knew there had to be homeless people crashing in there, but we were young and dumb and felt invincible as a group. It was part of what made it scary. We would always wait until between 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. to get into places like this, because we didn't want anyone to see or hear us or report us to the cops. We all explored it together, the first 2 times we went in. The screens and seats were all torn up inside each of the maybe 8 rooms. The bathroom mirrors were broken, and there was graffiti everywhere. We were fairly sure there were people hiding in there while we were inside, even if we never saw anyone the first 2 times we went in. There were a couple of shopping carts from a nearby Fred Meyer's inside, with cans and bottles in them and a few dirty blankets scattered around in different rooms. It looked lived in. After getting to know the layout of the place the first couple of trips, we made a game of it for the 3rd and final visit. This time the 6 of us that went split into 3 groups of 2, and with our partner, the 2 of us that would enter the front together and spend a full 5 minutes inside while the other waited outside at our chosen exit in the back building. The first 2, Beck and Doug, both went in while we waited outside. About 7 minutes went by, and just as we were starting to worry that we should go in after them, they made it out the other side through the fire exit. Doug told us that they went upstairs into the office, and there was a sleeping bag there that hadn't been there on the previous visit, and as soon as they went up there and saw it, they tried to leave immediately. But they turned around and tried to leave through the wrong exit. They were paranoid that they were being followed out, so they just stood there watching their way, entered the theater room for a minute, make sure they didn't hear any noise, before finally worked up the nerve to run out the right exit in the room across the hallway. Both Doug and Beck wanted us to leave, but Jack and I weren't having any of that and insisted on going in. Brad and Drew, the other 2 of the group that were going to go in last, wanted to come with us. So the 4 of us went inside while Beck and Doug both waited at the exit. The first thing we all wanted to do when we got inside was go check out the upstairs office. Just as we started to make our way up the stairs, we all heard a loud banging sound. It was coming from the back of the theatre. We all agreed it had to be Beck and Doug trying to scare us, so that we could come out and we could leave. We got upstairs and the pounding stopped. Doug was right. There was a sleeping bag rolled out on the ground with a few paper bags set up around it. Brad flashed a light in one of them and saw a syringe and something that looked like a vibrator. We were all pretty grossed out and had a little laugh about it. We looked around up there and didn't really notice anything else interesting, and we were staring back down the stairs when the pounding started again. We decided we should probably make our way to the exit. I hoped we hadn't been caught trespassing by the cops. We came out through the exit and immediately both Doug and Beck were talking over themselves to tell us that about a minute after we entered, a really tall, homeless-looking, creepy man with greasy hair walked right past them, heading for the entrance. Beck said hello as he passed, and the guy stopped, turned and kind of lunged a few inches towards him before stopping. One side of his face was really wrinkly. Beck thinks that he might have been a burn victim or something. The guy stared him down for a few seconds, and then without saying anything, turned and walked around the corner where we had gone inside. They started pounding on the door right after he was out of sight, to try and warn us there was a scary dude in there with us. We were in there for about 5 minutes with this guy and never saw him. He had to have heard us and hid somewhere. We started to walk back to our car in the Fred Meyer's parking lot about 100 yards away, and a car pulled into the parking lot and shined its headlights on us, before flashing its red and blues. The police officers had us all sit down in front of the spotlight in front of the car and asked us what we were doing. We told him we were going to head inside the movie theater, but a really scary tall guy walked in and we chickened out. He told us it was really dangerous to go into places like that, as there had been violence in that building before, and it'd be a shame if we were going to be hurt doing something stupid. He let us go when we drove off, and we saw him shining a light inside the front entrance. We took the nice police officer's advice and never went into places like that again. I never did find out what violence he was talking about. It could have just been a tactic to scare us out of coming back. But regardless, we stuck to graveyards and cemeteries after this. Better to be safe than sorry after all. Today, me and my 2 friends went up on the mountain behind my house, up to an abandoned mine. We went up to play airsoft, so we had a bunch of airsoft rifles. It was foggy and drizzling, but we didn't think about it. Anyway, at 4:50 we were starting to leave. By this time, it was almost dark out, and there was a very heavy fog setting all around us. We were just messing about by the old abandoned bucket crane when my friend Connor says that he sees a figure looming towards us in the fog. We thought it might have been a cop or some crackhead, so naturally we started hustling to leave. But the figure seemed off. It looked big and burly and seemed to move towards us at a relatively quick pace. I should mention that the fire siren from the neighboring town started going off, and the forest goes dead quiet. So Connor yelled out to it, to receive no response. I swear I saw a dog-like creature, but my friend says he saw a person. We took off down the old gravel road, just down the bend, so we were out of sight off the thing, and ducked into the woods, down about a 10 or 12 foot tall hill. We got 500 feet away from the road when we stopped to see if we were being followed. I saw behind some trees at about my 11 o'clock a figure that seemingly ducked behind the tree. My friend said things were moving to my 1 o'clock. They said they heard screaming almost like a wailing. I, however, heard a dog's bark. We slowly started back and eventually got to an ATV trail where we found a path down to the street. We sprinted down the path and eventually hit the road where my friend said it was following us to the road. Where once we were a block away, through the fog and in the middle of the road, I saw the dog sitting, looking at us, but my friends claimed to have again seen a person. My question is, what the hell was that? A skinwalker perhaps? We live in eastern Pennsylvania, so I think that's unlikely. Any suggestions as to what it could be would be appreciated. This was 5 years ago. My good friends and I were about 15 years of age, and doing what kids do, we snuck out every weekend and had older friends in high school to drive us places. In this particular situation, we decided to check out this 8-floor abandoned hospital 10 minutes away from our city. It being 8 a.m. and one of the worst winters in Michigan we had seen in the past 12 years. It was at least -15, with wind chill, because the hospital was less than 200 feet from the Detroit River. So my friends and I arrive, trying not to draw attention because we didn't want police attention. We jumped a 6-foot brick wall only to fall into the courtyard, which had easily 5 feet of unshoveled snow. So we trudged through it to the only entrance of the hospital, which is a back door with a staircase that goes up and down to the basement. Every other door was chained or barricaded, so we made entry and immediately saw satanic worshipping symbols on the walls in red spray paint. Some type of sacrificed animal, which was far too mutilated to even tell what it was, but judging by the size, I'd guess it could have been a small dog. So at this point, my 4 friends and I are disgusted, horrified, and a little bit pissed off. 2 of my friends go down to the basement, while me and the other 2 go upstairs. Flashlights in tote, we all kept seeing silhouettes moving across the hallway in front of us, but always from a distance, so we brushed it off for the moment. But then we had a medical desk tip over in the room down the hall from us, which sent items flying out the room into the hall. We ran so fast, not knowing if it was a bum or a demon. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, my other 2 friends in the basement of the hospital had found the room where they stored all the hospital beds and swore that something was thrown right at them, and they were certain they found the morgue, and they just had to check it out, because there was something that they had to see. So as we moved down the stairs, I kept hearing faint singing, but as if it were a little girl, so I kept thinking my friend behind me was being a smartass. "Stop it, John." "Thought it was you," he replies. So we stop in unison, and all of us hear what sounds like a little girl humming a song, but it wasn't further than a few flights of stairs above us. We all said screw it, ran out the building, hopped the wall and left. Since then we have tried to return, but they have picked up police patrols in the area, so it would have been far too risky. A couple of years ago, me and some friends had a short-lived phase of trying to go to as many cool abandoned places as we could. One of these was a very old hospital that had been closed down for roughly 20 to 30 years. It was pretty central in a big town, so it was quite regularly maintained in terms of boarding up windows and stuff. Our first visit started with us climbing through a window near the middle of the building. We managed to pry a plywood board up from the window, but as soon as me and my 3 other friends got in that room and opened the door into the main hallway, We all agreed pretty quickly that we shouldn't be there, and left. This is unusual for us, as we clearly weren't scared of much if we were easily able to break and enter into a building in the middle of town. We had also never been scared or anxious of anything before, and it weirded us out to the point that we all agreed to leave immediately. Our second visit is where it got proper weird. We went back around 2 weeks later, and all of the plywood on the windows was replaced with metal sheets, which isn't strange for a building in a large town where people are trying to break in regularly, apart from the fact that the window we went through originally was completely open. We climbed through anyway, and all got the same feelings again, except when we tried to open the door into the hallway, it was locked and felt as if something was pushed up against it on the other side. We left back through the window, and I was last, and I was about halfway out the window when I heard a young girl laugh pretty much directly behind me in this small room, and I near fell out of the window trying to get away from it. I thought it was just my mind being weird at first, until one of my friends asked if I heard the laugh, and if that's why I jumped through this window. All my other friends heard it too, and said it sounded like it came from that room. All of this is pretty normal stuff, and I'm sure the door being locked and having something behind it was just someone moving stuff around inside if them and my friends were exploring it too. The young girl's laugh we all heard in the room we were in, and we felt that feeling on both visits. I live in a pretty small and rural town, and most of the neighborhoods are somewhat in the woods. My high school soccer team was having an end of the season party at one of the players' houses in one of these wooded neighborhoods. Towards the end of the night, someone mentioned a house towards the end of the road past a curve, somewhat cut off by woods, that a doctor owned but was never there, leaving it somewhat abandoned. We all thought it would be a good idea to check it out. About 8 or 9 of us walked over there in the pitch darkness, and the house had some small lights, but no one was home. We go to the backyard where there was just a pool and started looking around. Behind the backyard there's only woods, and a little bit of woods on the side as well. It's a big property, so we split up in pairs of 2 or 3, with 2 groups walking around the house and one trying to get inside and on the roof. They weren't that smart. They couldn't get inside or on the roof, so we just sat in the backyard talking about random stuff and joking around, when I noticed a sound that was reminiscent of a clacking sound on the roof. It started sounding like someone was walking back and forth on the roof, and I looked up thinking that someone had made it up, and I see a silhouette of what I thought was one of the kids' faces, but it was pitch black, with bright white eyes. I looked around to see who was missing, but everyone was there. I looked back off the roof, and the sound and the thing were gone. I ignore it, thinking it was just a squirrel or something, and carry on with the conversation. Later, a friend of mine and I decide to talk on one of the sides of the house, and as soon as we crossed the corner, we thought we heard a deer walking through the trees. As we walk closer to get a better look, we hear leaves crunching all around us. We start getting a little spooked and turn around to walk back. When we get closer to the house, we hear leaves crunching right behind us and turn around to see a black stick figure standing not 10 feet away, motionless between the swaying trees, staring at us with those same white eyes I saw on the roof earlier. We both lose our minds and tell everyone we're heading back to the other kid's house. The entire time we're walking off the property and down the driveway, we feel like we're being followed, and still hearing leaves crunching as if someone were right behind us. As soon as we stepped foot off the driveway onto the main road, we felt an instant relief and didn't hear being followed anymore. We didn't turn around once the entire way back, not until we stepped foot onto the other kid's yard. Ever since then, I will occasionally drive by that house, trying to see if I spot what I saw that night. I've only ever seen a pair of white eyes in the woods that one time. The doctor has never returned, and now I think I know why. I lived in the suburbs of a small town in Italy until I was 19. Near my house there is a dirt road that leads into a small wood. I went to the woods with my friends, and a lot of the times when I was a kid would go there to play and explore. Before entering the woods on the side of the dirt road, there is an unfinished house, and going forward there is a country house built far from the road, accessible via a small path. I first saw the orb when I was 12, and I was going to the woods on my bike with my friends. We opted to stop and explore the unfinished house on the side of the road. So we went inside, but there was nothing interesting, just an empty house which we decided to leave. Before going out of the house, I noticed some stairs that were leading to the first floor. My friends were already on the road, ready to go, except for one of them that was still in the house with me. I asked him to wait for me, as I was going upstairs to see what was there. I was a little scared because the first floor was dark, but I decided to go there anyway. I took 2 steps and saw something on the last step. It was a new bouquet. It looked like someone had brought it the same day and dumped it there. At this point I was very scared and unsure if I should move forward. I took 2 to 3 more steps and I was able to see a room on the right. Inside the room there was the orb, a small white orb with a light floating inside it, but it wasn't a normal LED light. That light wasn't propagating. It wasn't enlightening or anything. It was just contained in this small orb that was stationary. I ran downstairs and outside as soon as I saw it, and never mentioned it to my friends, fearing they wouldn't believe me. As time passed, I forgot about the event. But when I reached 15, I started smoking weed, so I usually went to the woods alone to smoke in peace. Nothing ever happened in the woods, so it didn't scare me, even though the house did. So every time I went to the woods, I ran when I was passing by the house, and then forget about it. But someday I decided to explore the country house. I was high and taking everything very lightly, so I went into the house from the front door. There was another creepy empty house. The windows were open and it wasn't even dark, but one room wasn't like the others. It's the room with the big doors that you can see on the side of the country house. The floors and the walls in the rooms were burnt and totally black. There was a gas tank on the floor with some gasoline still inside it, and on one wall there was a small opening leading to very little and a totally dark room. This little room, perhaps 5 by 1.5 meters, was also burnt, and on the ground there was a pair of children's shoes. Suddenly the fear comes in, but it was nothing compared to the one I felt when I looked outside. In the middle of the countryside between the country house and the abandoned one, there was the same small orb that I'd seen years before. And I've never run so fast in my life. Until a year ago when I was 18, I was hanging out a summer night with my 2 friends. We were bored and opted to go into the woods that night. I started to become very scared and my friends were making fun of me, but I wasn't afraid of the darkness. I was scared of the orb. We parked the car at the end of the paved road and decided to walk the rest of the way. We passed by the abandoned house, and it was there, It was the orb standing in the middle of the countryside. It was the first time I saw it at night, and it was different because it wasn't just a circular light. Behind the light, there was a silhouette of a child. I couldn't see the face or the rest of the body, just a thin white silhouette. And this time my friends saw it too, because we all started to run. I don't live there anymore. I got a high school degree, went to uni in a big city. But if I were there, I would take pictures to show you the house, the burnt room, the shoes, everything. I've had trouble sleeping since then, and the orb has perpetually haunted my dreams. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. As always, a huge thank you to my incredible patrons for their help and support. It really does mean the world to me and helps keep everything running over here on Mortis Media. So thanks guys, you are seriously awesome. Yes, if you're good at art, I really do need some help. I'm afraid I can't disclose what the project is about, but it just involves drawing. Drawing, that's right. So if you're really good at drawing, because I certainly am not, I could really use your help. Email me, please. And, send some stuff you've worked on, that'll help. Otherwise, I'll just have to ask you for it and we'll send unnecessary emails. But yeah, I'm excited to see if any of you guys are interested. Things over here are looking good. Thank you to everyone who went over to my wife's channel and wished her a happy birthday. It really was a lovely gesture from all of you guys. And hey, she hit 1,000 subs. That was an extra cool birthday present to go along with the other stuff she got. It was just really nice. Thank you, everyone. Very kind gestures. So yeah, like I said in the other video, she's actually kickstarting her channel. We're working on it. We're going to be doing it together, not just her. And yeah, we're just exciting stuff coming. Not much else to say, really. Just grateful for everyone who went over and checked it out. But without further ado, then, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.